Good afternoon, everybody. We're so glad to be gathered for our September Early Childhood meeting. And we'll take a moment to say hello to anyone who may be following the live stream that's up on Facebook. So, and especially to say welcome to folks who are here with us today. A couple of quick things. If you're a member of the community who's here and would like to participate in public comment, there should be a sign-up sheet over on the table. Thank you, near Michael Fruit. So please do that, and we'll keep an eye on that. We're very excited today to be welcoming our two new community members, Carol and Marcia, and thought that we could go around and just do a full round of introductions of everyone on the committee. Feel free to share your name, how long you've been serving, where you live in the county, and if there's anything else you'd like the community to know. But we're just thrilled that you all are here and welcome you to the team, and really look forward to the work ahead and the road ahead together. We'll let the sirens pass, and then maybe Kid, you could start us, and we'll come around this way.
I've met you both because we were on the committee. Kit Kramer with the Asheville Chamber. I've been on the committee since its inception, I do believe. And while I live down here, I represent the business community.
Good afternoon. I was also on the committee, as you know, and Leslie Anderson. I'm also an old timer on the committee and have a consulting company, work a lot, both volunteer and professionally in the early childhood arena. So glad y'all are joining us.
I'm Wendy Weaver. I'm a retired early childhood educator, and I live in here, Buncombe County.
Hi everybody, Rachel Nygaard, good to see you.
Robert Presley, Buncombe County Commissioner, and been on early child care since the beginning.
Jasmine Beach Farrar, Buncombe County Commission, also been here from the start with a lot of these folks.
And Al Whitesides, welcome, Buncombe County Commissioner, and I've been here too from the beginning. And I've retired twice from banking, so
I'm Linda McDaniel. I met you both on the interviews. I'm with the ARC of Buncombe County, and I'm serving because of my concern and interest in children with disability services. I'm newly to the committee. I've been on a year or so, so welcome.
Marcia Davis, I'm with the Zedic Social Justice Fund, but more here as a parent of a 2-year-old. So interested in various aspects of early childhood education.
Hi, I'm Carol Steen. I'm with Biltmore Farms, and I live in North Asheville with my twins who are 8, and very excited to just plug in and help create access for our early childhood education.
Rich Johnston, I was on the committee also, as well, remotely and in person. So I've been with the committee since the beginning. I'm a community at large, represent a local psychologist. So thanks, good to see you.
I'm Philip Beltram with Community Foundation of Western North Carolina, and I've been here since the beginning. And that's nice.
And Michael, you're not.
Yeah, Michael Fruit, attorney.
Great. Well, welcome to everyone. Some of our members aren't here today, but you'll start to meet them as we move through future meetings. And again, we're just so glad you're here, and anything we can do to help with the orientation and onboarding, just be sure to let us or county staff know. Our first item of business today will be review and approval of minutes from our August meeting. You'll find that in your packet, and also online on the early childhood site for anyone following along. Did we need to do roll call, or are we good? I forgot about that.
I don't think we need to.
No, I forgot. Okay, okay, good. I'm letting go of those old habits. Good. Okay, back to review of our August minutes.
I move approval.
second.
Great. We have a motion and second for approval of the August 2nd minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Okay, the minutes pass. We don't have any items of old business, so we'll move right ahead into our new business. This is the annual meeting at which we elect officers, chair, vice chair, and secretary. We talked about this at our last meeting, and invited folks to think about whether they'd like to nominate themselves or a friend. Typically the chair role stays within the three commissioners so that we can have that direct line of communication with the full board of commission. So before we open the floor for nominations, just wanted to see if there's any questions or discussion. Okay. What we've done in the past is, I think, open one seat at a time and vote on those, and then we'll elect our officers for the year. So why don't we go in reverse order, and why don't we open the floor for nominations for secretary?
So Rich, you've been doing that, right?
I've been doing that 2 years now, I guess,
Oh.
or at least 2
I was gonna
cycles.
suggest you do it again. Yeah.
My only thought is, and I am not clear on when my tenure expires, so we may want to think about somebody new to provide continuity. But
This was a 3-year, what?
I was a 3-year, I believe, but then I renewed at one point.
That's true.
So I think I've got, I don't know how long, but
Angela can pull up the terms.
I'm happy to continue. It's not a complicated role. Anyone can pick it up.
You're really good at it.
We're just so used to you calling our names.
There's not much roll call. Not much need for it now that we're back face to face.
Well, is it okay if I nominate you then?
Second.
From the past.
That's right.
Past.
that's right.
We have
That's good.
But
So,
Okay, all right.
We have a nomination and a second on the floor. Just processing a second. Just to, is there anyone else who's interested in being nominated or making a nomination for secretary?
I move to close nominations.
Okay. We're gonna go ahead then and take a vote. All those in favor of Rich renewing as secretary, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, unanimously it carries. Rich, thank you for your continued service.
Yeah.
Thank you.
your term continues through the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
So that would allow you to be the secretary for the full FY '23.
Great.
Thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
We will now open the floor for nominations for vice chair.
Who is vice chair?
It's open right now.
Oh, it's
It's
open.
open.
Yeah. It's open. Linda was, and she finished her term, so it's been open since July.
Yeah.
What does vice chair do?
Vice chair, if the chair is not able to facilitate a meeting or represent the committee in some way, the vice chair would step in for that. Once in a while, there are items that it makes sense to sort of preview for the officers before they come to the committee. That maybe happens once a year. So there might be one additional meeting around that.
I move Kit Crane.
Second.
It's easy. Easy roll.
Yes.
You know, I'll do it if it's easy.
With this
At
committee.
least she's honest.
That's your platform.
That's her tagline.
Right.
Kramer, I'll do it if it's easy.
Okay, we have a nomination on the floor, a second. All those in favor of Kit Kramer as vice chair, please say aye. Those opposed? Hey, Kit, welcome to the vice chair.
I've never heard that before, but very honest.
And then we'll close out with chair.
So there are 3 commissioners here and you've done it. Do you want to continue doing it?
We've discussed, I'm happy to continue. I'm also happy for.
Okay.
I think
Robert, you okay?
Robert, what do you want to do?
Okay, well then, I nominate Jasmine.
Second.
Second. Oh,
We have a nomination and a second. For me to continue serving the chair role. All those in favor say aye.
I,
Opposed? We're very honored to continue in the role. Okay, we have our slate of officers for the coming year. A preview, and Carol and Marcia, as you're joining, this is something we do annually. Usually every August, we remind people and encourage people to consider whether they'd like to serve in one of these roles. And then first meeting in September, we usually appoint, and it usually goes something like this. So, but certainly encourage and want everyone to have various leadership opportunities as they move through their term on the committee. With that, we have the heart of today's meeting. We'll turn
Jasmine.
things.
With that, me and Al will be up for nomination tonight in the meeting, correct? To stay on.
Just in membership.
Yeah.
But that's just a renewal of,
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's tonight or?
is that
it-
tonight at our general?
I didn't see it on the agenda.
No, I don't.
No, you don't have to get your term, your midterm. We were reappointed
Yeah,
last
we're
year.
not, yeah.
So there's no,
But with me and Al up for reelection this year, continuing to be on.
you're on continuously
Right.
as long as you're
Commission.
on commissioner. Yes,
Okay.
yes. So yeah, no additional things to be taken
Okay.
for you two to continue.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
That's good.
Yes, which is great. Okay, so the exciting thing we get to hear today is a preview presentation of the presentation that will happen before the full Board of Commission tonight. Kit,
That's right.
Leslie, and Wendy, thank you all so much for the work you've done on this, and we look forward to turning things over to you. and going from there.
Rachel, are you doing an intro for
I
us?
would be happy to do an intro while I connect to the Zoom meeting so that people who are following along online can also see the slides. So this is our annually scheduled opportunity for the Early Childhood Committee to present to the Board of Commissioners, and that comes up this evening. In addition to our regular meeting for this evening, the committee discussed at the last meeting, what would it look like to have more of an annual report, sort of summary of how the grantees' performance has looked for the year we just ended, as well as what does the performance of the system look like. So those community indicators or system measures that we were looking at that we wanted to help impact by having an early childhood fund. So you'll see some of that performance information built in, and our presenters for this evening are in the order of presenting, Leslie, Wendy, and Kit, and they're going to preview the presentation for you now. That will be going to the Board of Commissioners this evening. We welcome any feedback or questions after that presentation. I just need a quick moment. I might leave yours for Andrew.
Yeah, I can't imagine you could talk and navigate it.
I know, me
I
too.
was sitting here
I
waiting
have
to
to
see
share
what was
to
gonna
hear
happen.
and to hear in 2 different ways. Can you come to me? So I have this one down here. Do you want to like this? Podium?
So we need to put it there.
You want us to do it? So you want us to do it on the podium?
Oh, whatever's more comfortable for y'all.
When did?
If you want it, you won't be on the stream, I think, if you go up there.
We won't be.
It will not be. The
Oh, I
podium's
see.
just off
Yeah.
camera.
Well, I have this one.
Want me to stay here then?
Yeah,
Yes, we
and
are.
Rachel can just advance for us.
Yeah, yeah, I'm at house.
That works.
That is.
Y'all need to be constructively critical.
Of course, we have 1 hour to correct anything that's in
Can I ask you a question in advance while you're going, before it even gets started? This will cut it off. So there was a set of success examples, and I thought that was great. Should we also put in an example of something that was challenging?
Well, the whole couple of years. we've
Well,
been
that's true.
challenging.
But I mean, sometimes
The
it's,
theme of these particular slides is when you look at the data,
Yeah.
it doesn't look beautiful. So that's, I
COVID is a good enough example then, but maybe in the future. If
think it's a really good point.
sometimes if you have one that fails, what did you learn from that? It doesn't mean it's the committee's doing anything wrong, or it doesn't mean the fund's not doing anything good, but sometimes it's just, okay, well, this one didn't
Yeah,
work.
and maybe to do it in a way where we don't call out the name of a specific entity, but I think it's a great idea.
I think we did have some of that sort of scattered.
Yeah.
Without telling one distinct story, maybe. But give us some feedback, you know, when you're ready.
All right, take it away, Leslie.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, commissioners and committee. Thank you so much for the invitation to report on the exciting and challenging work of our committee. We begin with a reminder of the connection to Buncombe County's strategic plan. As you know, the plan includes the important goal of kindergarten readiness within the educated and capable community focus area. The years of prenatal to age 6 are crucial in shaping a child's foundation for later school readiness and throughout life. With a return on investment of up to 13%, the benefits of investing in high-quality early childhood care and education are clear and extensive for children, adults, and society at large. A substantial research base confirms that when children 0 to 5 participate in high-quality early childhood education, they are, for example, more likely to graduate from high school, less likely to commit crimes, less likely to be unemployed, less likely to require public assistance, and generally are healthier and able to be more productive, among other findings. You commissioners are making investments in early childhood education because you know that in our county, we have major gaps in access to affordable, high quality early care and education. And that led to its selection as a county strategic plan goal. And now let's go into the update. The primary way that Buncombe County is working toward the goal of increased kindergarten readiness is through its Early Childhood Fund. This fund was established in response to barriers that exist within the early care and education system, such as a shortage of qualified teachers and staff in classrooms, as well as a high cost of care for families. Early learning can cost more per year than tuition at a North Carolina public university. The fund was established in 2018 with its first funding year in 2019. It began with $3.6 million and grows by 2% annually. The Early Childhood Committee, who we represent, was formed to guide the Early Childhood Fund through community engagement, public input, as well as policy and funding recommendations. And here's the crew. Here's a look at our current 15 Early Childhood Committee members as appointed by the commissioners. Membership includes 3 members of the Buncombe County Board of Commissioners, as we know, Al, Jasmine, and Robert. And I believe I speak for our committee when I say we are honored to be serving and working with these fine elected officials. Some members serve in designated seats on the committee: business or economic development professional, funder or community investment professional, parent, pediatrician or medical professional in service to young children, professor or higher education professional, and retiree from the field of early childhood education. And there are 6 members of the public representing the community at large. I must admit, we're a knowledgeable, dedicated, and stimulating group. The committee strategy for recommended investments of the fund is to support early care and education for children birth through kindergarten, with an emphasis on pre-kindergarten. When we say pre-kindergarten, we mean children 4 to 5 years old who are rising kindergartners. That includes and is not limited to NC Pre-K, which is a program of the state of North Carolina's Division of Child Development and Early Education. We fund projects in our fund that increase the number of children enrolled, increase quality in every dimension, develop, expand, and diversify the early childhood workforce, support families, and enhance the effectiveness of the overall early care and education system. In this evening's presentation, we're including an annual report on grants for the county's fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022. Here's a list of organizations who receive grants from the Early Childhood Fund. You'll notice a mix. There are larger, more institutional organizations on the list, such as Buncombe County Schools, as well as Community Action Opportunities, the operator of Head Start in our area. And you will see smaller or newer childcare centers represented here, such as the Christine Avery Learning Center and Evolve Early Learning. We're also proud to include organizations that are not childcare centers and are part of the larger early childhood system, serving children, families, and the early learning workforce in different ways, such as Collaborativa La Milpa, On Track, and Read to Succeed. So here are examples now of funded projects operated by these grantees. Again, what we hope will stand out here is the diversity of projects, services, and grant levels. The projects include everything from classroom expansions and operations to much needed supplemental support, such as behavioral health services and parent engagement. There's a strong emphasis on workforce development to recruit, support, and retain professionals in the field, and we'll touch on this topic a little bit later. At this time, I will pass to committee member Wendy Weaver. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. Once the grants are awarded, county staff work with grantees to set up performance contracts. These include scope of work that defines services, deliverables, and performance measures. Grantees submit quarterly reports on their project performance, including updates on activities, progress towards goals, and use of funds. Grant reports are published on the Early Childhood Fund website, which you can link to, and we encourage commissioners and members of the public to follow along with the work. Continuing with our annual reports on grants for fiscal year 2022, we want to highlight some takeaways from the grantees' quarterly reports. 71% of all goals were met across 21 funded projects. This is a lower level of goal attainment than we would expect in a regular year as the result of COVID. The goals where we saw the lowest attainment were around enrollment, attendance, and staffing. For example, only 20% of goals were met for the number of slots and enrollment percentage, and only 50% of goals were met for student attendance. We did see that grantees had good success on goals related to student achievement. 89% of these goals were met. COVID impacts continued in fiscal year 2022, and the field of early care and education was especially hard hit. Some examples of what we heard from grantees. Young children were not yet eligible for COVID vaccinations, through the majority of the fiscal year, and weren't approved until June 18th by the CDC. Programs were unable to have as many classrooms open due to lack of staffing. Enrollment was lower as families chose other care and learning opportunities, sometimes choice, sometimes they had to. Non-program staff were repurposed for classroom operations. Teacher and student attendance were impacted by COVID exposures and infections, and volunteer engagement was limited, often curtailed due to public health precautions. Many programs mentioned in their end-of-year reports how they addressed the increasing social and emotional needs of students during the trauma of the pandemic. A report cited in Fortune magazine 2/9/22 from Child Care Aware America stated that nationwide 16,000 child care centers and licensed homes shut down between December 2019 and March 2021. Those that stayed open had to be both sensible and sensitive in their ability to respond to family needs during the height of the pandemic. Although our data show that important spots and entire classrooms for young children were lost or shuttered in Buncombe County, many of the programs the commission funded nimbly managed to weather the storm and were able to improve outcomes for young children. These are some examples of success. Despite challenging times, there was plenty of success to celebrate in fiscal year 2022. You'll see on the screen some examples from our grantees. We'd like to share a few anecdotes. The Family Child Care Network noted that we met goals by pivoting and adjusting our approach and our community engagement to meet shifting needs. And for any of you who have spent time with a just 3-year-old or maybe a whole classroom of them, you'll enjoy Christine Avery's Learning Center remarks. We were also able to have the toilet in the 3-year-old classroom fixed, and it's now operative. Exclamation point for that.
As soon as they're in that. Very excited about that.
Evolve Early Learning stated, we are learning how to interview and enroll so that our classrooms are balanced, inclusive, and workforce staff. We are operating on a wait list for fall and beyond. Very good news. An on-track secure program participant stated, I had an incredible experience and I'm so proudly blessed to say I am a homeowner now. I continue to save and learn valuable debt relief tools that I share with others. Thank you. And here's a statement that we received from Spanish-speaking members of Colaborativa La Milpa. This is their translation, and I took some little chunks out, but basically they said, we feel very proud to have had access to knowledge training. The trainings have been so focused and of such value to learn more about the development of our children under 5 years of age. Since most of the members of the cooperative and network are Spanish-speaking immigrant women, and that although their knowledge and experiences on childcare is extensive, with the received theory and practice, they have been able to provide not only care to the children of the community, but also now provide education regardless of language. The overall impact of the Early Childhood Fund over time can be seen in this slide. With the $14.8 million invested so far, we supported the creation of 393 new slots. Existing slots supported is a count of all the licensed childcare slots operated by organizations that received an early childhood grant that year. In early learning, the term slots reflects the number of children served. It gives a picture of the reach of the fund in any given year. I really love this photo. To me, it means more slots mean more friends able to learn more together. At this time, I'll pass to committee member Kit Kramer.
Thank you, ma'am. As we said at the start, the reason we have an early childhood fund is to improve community conditions. There are several community indicators that we watch, including this information about the number of children served. We want to see an increase in the percentage of children in the community who are served by licensed early care and education programs, because participation is high, and high quality early learning is a factor that increases kindergarten readiness. These charts reflect the percentage of children enrolled in licensed care over time. The top chart in the blue and orange shows all children from birth until kindergarten. Currently, 29% of all children in this age range in Buncombe County are enrolled in licensed care. The bottom chart in the green and blue shows pre-kindergarten age children, 4 and 5-year-olds who are not yet in kindergarten. Currently, 51% of children this age are enrolled in a licensed program. The trends over time don't show the steady upward curve we'd hoped for, and we know this is because of COVID. In fact, everybody around this city is going to be cursing these couple of years because they're going to throw off all their data for everything, including for this. 2018 is a benchmark showing where we were prior to the establishment of Buncombe's Early Childhood Fund. 2019 is year one of the grants. 2020, when the line drops downward, is when COVID hit. Several programs reported wait lists for this fall's enrollment. So we look forward to the future and that the graphic trend will be up over time. Even before the pandemic, there was a workforce crisis in the field of early child care and education. Factors that contribute to this are the strict level of education, credentialing, and training requirements, combined with the generally low levels of pay for these positions. When COVID-related workforce shortages began, this exacerbated an already challenging situation for early educators. The number of employees working in licensed facilities has dropped from 1,045 in 2019 to 869 in 2022. We do need to share a disclaimer on this data that this reflects all employees of all child care facilities licensed by the state that are located in Buncombe County, which includes some after-school programs as the state doesn't break out that data. Kindergarten readiness is a key community indicator related to this work. Until recently, we haven't had good information about kindergarten readiness as our school systems were each using different assessments. Starting in 2020, we now have a unified assessment, which is a big win, giving us baseline information about kindergarten readiness. NCELI, the North Carolina Early Learning Inventory, is a formative assessment which measures children's proficiency across 14 measures. 7 of these measures, the ones in the boxes at the top right of the screen, are the ones we look at, which address early language, literacy, cognitive, and math proficiency. We know that this isn't a perfect assessment. For example, with so many domains, it makes it difficult to have one true yes or no about whether a child demonstrates kindergarten readiness. Another limitation is the data is not available for charter, private, and home schools, which together represent a growing number of students in our community. But all limitations aside, this is a big deal. And to have this unified way to assess and track kindergarten readiness in the community. Here is the NCELI data for 2020, the first year of the new assessment and the most recently available data at the time we put these slides together. 1,819 children in the Asheville City Schools and Buncombe County Schools were assessed. Of those 1,247 children, were 69% met or exceeded the majority of the selected objectives, 4 out of the 7 that were listed on the previous slide. The NCELI data has revealed the troubling fact that at the time of kindergarten entry, there is already an achievement gap. On the previous slide, we shared that 69% of all children assessed met or exceeded the proficiency standard for the majority of the objectives. Here you'll see that this number is lower for children of color. It is lower for children of color than for white counterparts. For example, 56% of Black children met this threshold on the assessment in comparison to 75% of white children. So there's still a lot of work to be done in closing the achievement gap. We're pleased to have this new data partnership and look forward to working with our early learning partners and the school systems about what it will tell us about what we need to do differently. We'll be able to study the impact of participation in pre-kindergarten programs and how this impacts children's kindergarten readiness. We'll work to understand more about the disparities. We will have information over time to be able to map trends and impacts. And importantly, we'll be able to use the information to adjust our investments in programming in accordance with what we learn. Before we conclude this evening's presentation, we want to take a moment to add a bit of information about a special project related to our Early Childhood Committee. While this is not funded through the Early Childhood Fund we've been presenting about tonight, it's one of the most innovative and bold steps our community is taking to expand kindergarten readiness. The NC Pre-K expansion project is being led by the Buncombe Partnership for Children and funded by Buncombe County's COVID recovery funding through the American Rescue Plan. Partnership for Children has been awarded $3.2 million to build capacity to expand NC Pre-K in Buncombe County. The pilot project just launched for this school year is intended to result in lower teacher turnover, increase provider participation in the NC Pre-K program, and reduce barriers for families. The project will increase stability and equity among existing NC Pre-K providers, expand the pool of high quality providers and licensed teachers, and make it easier for eligible families to learn about and take advantage of NC Pre-K's proven benefits. Our committee will be following along with this work and keeping the commissioners posted about the project and its impacts over the next 2 years. In summary, we want to thank the Buncombe County Commissioners for their leadership on this particular issue. Research has shown that there are lifelong benefits to early childhood education. And we want to thank the board for making a wise investment, not just on an annual basis, but in the special projects, because we know that children are our greatest natural resource. We're not only investing in the workforce of today, we're investing in the workforce of tomorrow and in their brain power. We have strategies in place to build a strong and equitable recovery from the pandemic and continue advancing early care and education as a keystone to a thriving Buncombe County. Thanks.
Yeah.
Any thoughts? It's a lot of data. Was it too much data?
No, I think you did a good job of bringing us to where we are, and you were fair with it and balanced. You told the negatives and the positives, and everybody understands that where we've been and how we've tried to navigate through COVID. But you've done a good job with it, yeah.
Well, Rachel did a real good job.
Rachel, yes, that's
Before we
sure
got
to
our
acknowledge
hands
Rachel.
on it, it is pretty
Yeah.
easy to edit. But she did a
Amen.
great job of putting the information together.
So
This is great, yeah.
one of the things that was mentioned, and so I'm just, preparing to go into that. I'm always trying to think about what questions you might be asked. So one of the, and this may have been answered in a meeting I didn't attend, but so you said that data for charter schools, homeschools, and one other kind were not private schools, and that number is growing.
Yes.
So that's going to skew the data. So is there a way to mandate that they participate in providing numbers so that we can talk about the entire county?
Which data was that? Was that kindergarten?
This was
readiness?
one I pointed out to Rachel that I was going to have questions about as well. If it's growing, how much is it growing? How much has it grown over? Do we have any answers on that?
I got a little bit of data back, which does confirm the participation in those non-traditional public schools is growing, and participation in the K-12 public school systems is on the decline. We don't have the answer to your question today, but I think it is a really important question because that's a big data limitation.
Philip, were you talking about, and I can't remember.
I can't remember which data.
Was it in just numbers and row?
NCEI, the kindergarten readiness assessment. is
That's what I
being
thought it was related to
used
the assessment.
by
Right,
the
so if
public
you've
school
got
systems.
25-30% of your kids who aren't participating in the assessment,
Right.
and we're trying to reach all the kids, not just the kids that are.
Well, and I don't even know, I was wondering, do we even, or can we offer them the option of using the same assessment? I mean, it would be up to them on whether or not they chose to use it, but I think that would be a good follow-up action for us to say, if it's possible for them to use the same assessment, could we offer it to them legally and at least ask?
Well, it seems like the charters,
Charters, for sure.
for sure, because they're part of the public school system. Seems like they could be mandated to do it.
That's true.
The state, I guess the state deals with homeschool and
Private school.
private schools are private.
No, they're just private, period. You're right.
I think most of the growth is happening within the charter space, so that would capture probably a lot
It
of
would if you could.
data.
Yeah, that was fun.
But it does seem like that's something that could be mandated from the county school system or and the city and county,
Right.
but maybe not. I mean, I'm an expert.
I think it's a good idea and we should follow up on it.
I do too.
Yes.
I'm interested in one data point, the disparities in school readiness graph and table, and the no response category.
Yeah. Circle that.
Leaves me with a lot of it. I mean, that's a big chunk of kids. And so it's hard to clearly assess this aspect without clarification of that. Do we have any further explanation or understanding of that category?
Page 18.
Are folks able to give no response? That's something that can be addressed.
From what I understand, 2020's data is not as robust as we will have going forward. Another example is income. Typically, when we look at, say, end of year tests and performance, we can look at it by an income demographic. And that information comes from the participation in the school lunch program. But all school lunches have been no cost. So families haven't been filling out all of the same data collection forms that they usually fill out to correlate with this. So
I'm confused. What is no response related to? Is it because it's in the same column with race?
It's, I
I
think.
didn't
that's-
answer it, but what I
you didn't
understand
answer
is
that question.
it'll be getting better.
Rachel, what's in the all other category? Where is disabilities in this?
I'm interpreting all other to mean any race other than black or white.
Yeah.
That's what my
There were
interpretation
some
was.
race categories that were combined into all other because they weren't statistically significant to be their own line, like Asian and Pacific Islander as its own category that got combined. Whereas the information about disability status, not included. And so I think that asking that question is really important so that we can see about getting to add it. Like income.
As we move forward, can we dig into the raw data so we could have more enumerated categories by race and income, or is this coming to us in a form that we can't kind of work with further? We can? Okay. I would love to see sort of a more developed dashboard for us, including if there is information about disability status. As much as we can find out, basically, I think would be helpful. This feels like one of the clearest kind of set of vital signs that we've been able to produce to date in this field, and just
This slide,
the totality of what you all produced. You know, I think that's been one of our, in some ways, it's kind of unspoken in this presentation, but I think worth naming is that a lot of the work that's happened the last few years has been at the sort of system level work of getting to a place where we could actually present the data this clearly. You know, having the aligned assessment tools in place, having now the single entry or portal for parents, like there are these sort of systems level improvements that 3 years ago sort of felt like pipe dreams in a lot of ways. And as I think about the story of sort of where we are right now, it's part of it is that we've kind of done that retrofitting infrastructure level work to create a sound foundation. And then part of it is that we have tried to stem the tide of what would have otherwise, I think that the pandemic had pretty crushing impacts. You know, I think that we would have seen much more precipitous lines had these funds not been invested during this 2 years, and had they not been invested in sort of nimble ways we were able to. So I wonder if we, as we sort of think about sort of how we're framing this tonight, there's opportunities to make sure the full commission is sort of hearing that bigger picture piece as well. And that's something that when you all present, if there's questions, and then it'll come to us and we can lift.
Exactly, and I think that would be a very appropriate way to deal with it too, but we'll try and reinforce that as we make our presentation.
Because these are big step forward that
They
we can
are.
for the
I mean, you
first time.
think back to the original meetings where we were trying to figure out, well, so what are we gonna measure here? I mean, we were literally having those questions about, is it, I mean, big emphasis on number of slots. And if you, I mean, that initial was over almost 400 slots or more than 400 slots that were created over this time period. That's a big deal. That's a lot of kids and a lot of parents.
I think one of the things that struck me when I was looking through the presentation before the meeting, and I knew this, but because of the way it's graphically presented, it struck me in a different way, was the staffing levels slide and the decrease from 1023 to 869. Now, COVID probably had a lot to do with that, but at the same time, the structural part of that has to do with salaries.
It is, we have abysmal
And so
salaries.
it's COVID, but it's not just COVID. And it's not something that what we're working on, like we're participating in the Secure program, which is great. And you have 89 teachers, assistants, et cetera, participating in the Secure program. That's great. But at the systemic problem that's got to be addressed is we've got to be able to pay these teachers more without having them to go through some charitable program to do it. Secure is great, but Secure is a Band-Aid. I mean, I love Secure. Community Foundation supports that too. But, and so that chart, the way it was presented was really striking to me. And how difficult the problem that's going to be to solve. If the prices go up, so does the cost.
Well,
And the cost is a problem.
Salaries also is not a sustainable method over time.
Right.
I mean, it's a worry.
Well, we're about to
We're
see
gonna-
that. It won't be long and we'll be at that point where those funds are no longer available.
Anyway, it was because of the way it was presented and the way y'all presented it in this, it struck me in a way that it had not before. So I think that's a good thing.
Even though it's not.
The news is bad, but
Exactly.
but
That's
it's
the whole
very
point.
instructive.
Well, I mean, you could also say it as, you know, I mean, I think on that point, that maybe the news seems bad, but it also just indicates new opportunities, right? I mean, the idea that any crisis is going to stress the system out at its weakest points. And so what this pandemic did for us is kind of highlighted some of those pieces that government needs to work on. And I mean, I would say from my experience, both helping to run a child care center and been on the other side as well, it's the salary piece does become like a huge barrier, especially in moments when childcare is difficult, COVID is happening, folks can actually find other jobs that pay the same amount and that are a lot less.
Or more.
Or more, right? That are less stressful and require less education. So then, I mean, you know, for me, the question then becomes, one, it's important to, I think, celebrate that we're seeing this information because now it's giving us like a little bit more data to kind of deepen our understanding of what's really going on. But that it makes me curious about, are there folks locally that are working on policy points that we might be able to partner with and say, here's what we're seeing, here's what the impact of the money is. Is there someone locally, and I believe there might be a few orgs that are working on the salary piece from a policy perspective. And might that be something that we might be ready to support or just even information share with?
So when on that point, it's just as an aside, that I understand from the partnership that the first supplement checks are starting to go out or will very soon to the local pre-K programs. So we'll be starting to see soon enough, at least some early information about what's happening as those supplements are landing. And one of the places they're going is teacher pay increases. So we'll have some stories back on that soon. Sorry, Carol.
Oh, no, you're fine. When I saw that slide about the teacher, workforce reduction during the years of COVID, one of the first questions in my mind was, how does that benchmark against other industries who also lost jobs? Because I think all industries saw a loss in their workforce. And so how does that actually benchmark? Is it really a positive story where the percentage of the workforce didn't reduce as much as other areas within our economy? So it was just a question mark for me of everyone's downtrending, but comparatively, where does that sit? And maybe the Mountain Area Workforce Development Board might have some more specific data if you could compare to teachers or other like industries around education, if they saw the same decline.
You know, and so much of what was happening then also had connections to public health regulation. The size of classrooms was literally regulated. Then you've also got the situation of you've got a set number of classrooms, but you're having a smaller population in each one. So part of this was predestined that it was the numbers were gonna be way down because they were designed to be way down to hold down the virus. And so, and then with the same thing happening in every other industry, and except maybe grocery stores and distribution and things of that nature, we have a reckoning and a shift in the demographics of this country permanently, and the great resignation that occurred. We have a reckoning of what's going to happen if we don't raise salaries over time. I mean, one of the things that we did at the chamber on our legislative agenda was to lump in daycare workers along with teachers in terms of calling for more salary and a statewide salary supplement. Again, I don't know how much that's going to cost. It may be completely unrealistic, but I just see us we're going to run into a brick wall around this issue, because working parents, even though they've got more flexibility, I would gather, more flexibility in terms of where they work today than ever before, there are some jobs you cannot do at home. And those people have to have childcare. So it's really thought-provoking, not entirely positive, but very thought-provoking.
Well, thank you all. This is a fantastic presentation. Anything else you would like from the full committee before?
Jasmine, I'm wondering if this is another topic we might want to have a briefing on by whoever about salaries, about the program that the state did implement where they pushed money out for supplementing salaries, how the field is going to deal with this cliff, as they're calling it, because it's coming in less than a year, maybe a year and a half or something. It's close. And what's going to happen here. The Partnership for Children will have some information, but this could be a major crisis again, just as a bounce back really from pulling back on the things that were done to prop up.
That's a great suggestion.
I think the other thing is, we're gonna see higher needs in childcare that's coming about because of a lot of issues. And it's already presented itself in Head Start and other childcare. So I think that's a thing to consider too, because some people just don't have the stamina for it. You know, there's certain fields in human services that people just can't handle. And we've seen that happening with childcare where people are saying, I can't do this, it's too much. They don't understand the behaviors, they don't understand what's going on. The parents really don't understand, so there's really no help to the teachers or the workers. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. And how we get there, I don't know. And I think what Leslie's saying, how we need to get some clarity on.
Yeah. Well, thank you all, and great flags for future learning and discussion also. The next item on our agenda was something we added in this is designed to be an initial discussion today about how we want to think about multi-year awards. We'll have to make a decision about this before we release this year's application. But just as a refresher, in years past, we have some years made the decision to award multi-year grants. This past year, we kind of put a pause on that practice, in part because there was just still so much in flux related to folks coming out of the pandemic. And we wanted the committee to have a chance to really dig in on that question. So we've added it as a discussion today, and it's really designed as the first discussion point, and more open-ended today. We don't have to reach a decision, but to take a few minutes to dig in on people's thoughts on whether that's something that we should open up, meaning when someone applies, they could apply for multi-year funding. And we could make that decision as part of our portfolio of grants. Just briefly lifting up some of the reasons that it's good and then some of the challenges that come up. Some of the reasons it's good is particularly when you have larger scale projects, it creates a continuity of funding over several years that can be leveraged to help attract additional funding. We saw that with the project of Werner and Buncombe County Schools collaborating at the new Emma Elementary Emma site. Having a multi-year commitment from the county enabled them to attract in additional funding that allowed them to secure what they needed for the overall project, and to spend that, to have to spend fewer resources trying to raise those funds because they knew that they were secured. And so it can be a way for us to help achieve some of the bigger lifts of, say, bringing a center online that can serve 100 kids, for instance. There are also some projects where there's a pilot phase and then implementation phase that happens over a few years, and there's just a natural runway that's built in. And the committee has decided at times that it makes a lot of sense to have several years of investment in that. One of the downsides, and probably the most obvious, is that it then ties up a portion of the overall funds. And the more multi-year grants you do, the more is tied up year over year. So there's that much less new funding that's available. You can balance that by kind of creating a pipeline, and we could think through ways of having a certain number of multi-year projects that are funded, or having one large scale project at a time that's on that multi-year cycle. There's various ways to handle it, but the general concern was that that would tie up a lot of resources with a smaller number of providers rather than keeping them moving and flowing throughout the community and more providers. So that's kind of top level discussion, but eager to hear what people's thoughts are. And again, no need for a decision today. This just tees up a decision we'll need to make this fall.
This reminds me of, with my own organization and thinking about an investment policy and how much, if we're lucky enough to have net income, how much would go into long-term investment, medium-term, and short-term, kind of the entrepreneurial type of things. I wonder if we shouldn't think about some guidelines like that, where we say a percentage of our money, and they're guidelines, they're not hard and fast rules, because the minute we create something, who knows what'll end up being presented in front of us. But I wonder if we shouldn't just kind of have a policy about how much of the available funding would be off the table. I mean, even if we did that for long-term projects, I just don't know how it would be viewed if we came back one year and almost all of the money was hooked into long-term projects. Maybe that's fine. But I just think maybe having some guidelines could make sense.
Part of this, well, there are pros and cons to it. As Jasmine said, I think, the idea of having a plan or guidelines sounds good, but then is it really a bad thing?
Does it stifle creativity, or does it?
I mean, if you were investing in really good programs, does it matter that the next year you're not going to have as much money to go to other programs because you're already investing? So that's one question. One question I had was, are most of the large, I think this is true, and I haven't gone back and done my own research on it, but are most of the larger multi-year grants for construction? It seems like a lot of the multi-year grants, or at least maybe it's not multi-year, but maybe it's just that they come back year after year with these really big construction projects at the county schools, for instance. I mean, that takes a big chunk. And if that construction was finished, I wonder if we'd feel quite the same, because that's a lot of money. And I don't know the answer to that, but it seems to me, just in recollecting, that maybe the pressure on that won't be so bad once some of those larger construction projects are done. I don't know.
Like Werner.
Yeah. And then the third thing was the other potential downside, although I think it could be mitigated, is that particularly if somebody is essentially using multi-year funding for operating support, if you don't taper it, and tapering sounds condescending or patriarchal, and so I don't like to say, well, you won't be able to handle your finances, so we're going to give you less each year, to make sure that but if you don't do that, then that nonprofit faces a cliff in the year when that ends, it's a cliff. And so some
overly dependent then on
some
the grant funding.
some funders will start at, they might do a multi-year grant of $80,000 and they do 40, 40, 25, and 15, to make it not such a huge chunk for them to bite off in that third year. But that does feel a little, it feels a little condescending or patriarchal. But that's the traditional way philanthropy's done.
But that fits in, I think, with the questions we've had about sustainability.
Mhm.
Right.
One of the criteria upon which we base our assessments. So that would be a way to kind of build in encouragement to maintain or improve sustainability.
Mhm.
I think we do have a situation where we're funded several years, the operating funds of the same organization. And in some cases, moved it up instead of decreasing it. And I've had a concern about that because I don't doubt that these groups need the support. And yet, if we get locked into being a major funder of certain groups, while our fund grows a little bit each year, at some point, maybe it feels like they're favored groups in the county that are always going to be funded. And so maybe that tamps down some creativity or innovation or partnerships that might come up that in that sort of favored status diminishes that. I do think the point on the construction is well taken, Philip. One thing we discussed, I think, when we got these multiple requests from Berner and the county was to require that before these groups come to us, that they do a planning phase for what their project is going to be and how much it's expected to cost. Because we got into paying for some things that they hadn't expected. And we hadn't seen really what our exposure might be on the front end. And then we really had to keep helping in order to get it done. So I think a little more conversation about some of these big projects with us on the front end would be helpful.
Without those big projects, we wouldn't have those great numbers of new slots.
Well, there's no question about it.
Although, frankly, I don't know if this is in fact true, because I was sitting here thinking, could we encourage the adaptive reuse of older buildings or different buildings that were for something else, rather than building things from the ground up? I don't know if that'd be less expensive. It might be just as expensive. I don't know, but it also makes me think, to encourage the reuse of buildings rather than just saying, scrap that, or we're going to start over. Maybe that's something to think about for the future. It may not be a cost saver at all, though.
Especially if those buildings are in some of those childcare deserts.
Yeah, exactly. If you could take a building and adaptively reuse it, that's in an area that is underserved, that could be a have a multiplier effect on the positive impacts. But it might be just as expensive. Yeah, it might be.
But then you have to build in these other benefits to the community, not all this being thrown into the landfill from the other
Right.
building. There are all kinds of other dimensions to think about.
I tend to land on the side of us having the option to do multi-year funding, partly for a lot of reasons, but partly, but one of the things we've talked about from the start is how we can maximize the impact and leverage of these county dollars. And one way we do that is by them being general operating dollars in a space where there's very little general operating support. And then the other way can be through strategic multi-year grants that help to leverage other funding and bring other funders to the table. And as we are still, I think, trying to, to continue making the case to the philanthropic community and also to hopefully around the corner in the case we're making to the business community that this is an area to invest in. I think those are some of the types of things, especially in larger projects, that you see other funders looking at. So for that reason, and then also the reason that especially with some of the larger and more ambitious projects, which we know we're going to need to actually begin achieving scale on creating new slots over time. We know it's not a one-year project from the get-go. We know it's a 3 to 5 year project. And us being able to just be in and answer that question from the start as a partner feels to me like it best expresses what we're trying to be, which is a lead partner at the table saying yes where we can, and helping create a context where we can bring the other resources that we know are required into the mix versus kind of waiting on the, watching everyone dance and figure out if we want to get in. So I tend to lean in that direction. And especially as we sort of think about, if we kind of try to take the plane up for a second and think about a 10-year arc from where we launched this to being on the cusp of 2030, which is with a partnership, some of their goals around reaching 75% enrollment in NC pre-K. I think we kept things as stable as we could during the pandemic, but we took a real hit to the growth we are starting to achieve. And if we're going to get serious about growth, it's going to have to be on the backs of some large scale projects and some very aggressive attempts to scale centers and classrooms and
Well,
stuff.
and maybe we need to state that, and maybe we need to have a numerical goal, now an adjusted numerical goal now that we've been through the pandemic about where we want to be by X time, which means, and do the math for how many slots that is per year. And maybe then the weighting when we are looking at, when we're weighing out what's going to be the heaviest factor, maybe you get more points for more slots. Maybe you get a weighted kind of vote for an application that shows more slots that helps us achieve that goal. Because I know from the beginning, we want to enhance quality too, but we need more slots.
Yeah.
Big
And I mean, I think a lot of our back and forth in the last few years is we know we have to invest in the quality and the infrastructure and the systems before we can get serious about slots. And we've done, I think, or at least the theory of change we're working on is that we have been doing that.
But maybe now is the time to think about, have we been setting goals for particular numbers of slots per year?
We have not to date. We've really been focused on.
I just don't think we were able to it initially, but I'm wondering if we shouldn't be thinking that way over time.
What do folks think of that?
I think we've in just this short discussion, we've done a good job of pointing out several key issues that we've got to deal with in growing. But I really think that one of the things, it's all about more slots. But I think somebody touched on that we need to look at the amount we're setting aside for, I think we need to get to the point for how much are we going to set aside for multi-year funding? How much, we can set aside for just the small groups that are coming in? Because I think it's important too that we have everybody at the table. And we need to look at construction. What we're talking about is something, if we're going to be successful going forward, we've got to deal with. And we've got to deal with it sooner rather than later. And I think we need, it's important now that COVID hopefully is behind us, that we come up with a policy of how we can tackle this. And I think it's going to have to be something that we're pretty rigid with. Sure, we'll allow some room to tweak it, but the reason I say rigid, because our funds are going to be limited. So we've got to think in that, this is not going to be easy to tackle. It's going to be complicated. But we can't just continue every year to go with who's yelling the loudest. We've got to, and that's where 10-year plan or something where we look ahead and we think about it, I think it's going to be crucial. Because, you know, when we talk about old buildings, renovating them, well, we saw this. I remember a conversation I had with Bob Engel on the store he's got out here at Tunnel Road when he bought Walmart. And I said, why can't you go ahead and just renovate the old Walmart store? It's open space and all. And when he pointed out to me that it's cheaper to build a new one and quicker than to renovate that. And that's what we're looking at now with the old primary school. It's full of asbestos and all that. The only good thing for it is probably a bulldozer. But we've got to think of all that. But I think it's going to be to our benefit to really pick a subgroup to look at that. And this is something we need to be, I think, working with pretty quick. I hope I haven't muddied up the water, but I think we've got to deal with it if we're going to be successful going forward.
Well, what about, I mean, we said the data shows that private schools, charter schools, and homeschooling are all growing. Is there a type of childcare? Is there, you know, like the in-home childcare that could be encouraged from that group? If it's a growing segment, maybe that's some low-hanging fruit to get more slots created.
I think if your goal at the end of the day is like more high quality slots, and going back to the conversation about multi-year general operating, there really is no way to do that without multi-year general operating grants. And so, I mean, and I'm not sure if that's, I think our conversation has shifted, but I wanted to put a plug in for that. Especially if, you know, for folks who are running these institutions, or if even if you're home-based and you're getting some money to pilot up a project, the reality is that a lot of the costs that it takes to run these organizations, they may pitch them to us as a project, but they're ongoing general operating support, right? I mean, there's no way for them to do the work that we say that we need them to do without, you know, multi-year support. And while we do like want to care about long-term sustainability, I could see why another founder would think about long-term sustainability and want to reduce, I think Philip, you brought up the example of folks reducing grants over time, but that's just not a sustainable way to support an industry that just isn't, what's the word?
Lucrative.
Yeah, it's just, thank you. I was like, what's the it's just not lucrative. I don't think that there's any way if you're going to bolster this industry to say that we're not going to have a long-term investment in a few anchor organizations. Because the way the system is set up now, there's absolutely no way for them to make up that money otherwise.
The sad part is that the state of North Carolina is not helping with that. I mean, the county by county strategy is just it's a non-starter. But here we are with some wonderful resources that most other counties don't have. But I feel like that's really their responsibility, and we can't even get them to help us with childcare subsidy, market rates, the basic support that a lot of these centers could really use, and they are not being paid what it costs them to serve that child. Just trying to get that. For 15 years, we've worked on that, and we have not gotten it yet. And so, I don't know, you know, we've got some real challenges with our legislature to help them understand how important their investment is. I think that's an incredibly difficult long-term goal. But that's really where it should come from, is state government.
And they keep building up the rainy day fund.
Right. They have billions
$6
that
million.
they spend.
I'm keeping an eye on the clock. It's coming up on 2:20 and our meeting will be over at 2:30. I feel like this is some good fodder for the conversation, and we can delay a decision. We'll need to make a decision come November, December before the application's open. So keep chewing over it. We can revisit as needed as well. Thank you all for digging in on that. Next up, we have site visit planning. I think Angelin's going to lead us through what's happening there.
So it's time to start planning the site visits for this fall. This year, we have 22 projects. 4 of those organizations have multiple projects, so it would result in 17 actual site visits. I know last year we did them all virtually because of COVID. I think that should just be the tagline of everything that we say now is because of it. But anyway, I have heard some talk amongst committee members that you do have a desire to go back to in-person site visits. And also realize that some grantees may not still be open to have, multiple people coming in. And we did have, one of our other committees has offered grantees the option that they can choose a virtual or in-person. And kind of need to get you guys input on, how you want to conduct the site visits. And if you do have a preference of it being in person, or if you're okay with it being a virtual option for those who aren't comfortable having people in.
As a reminder, these are 45-minute meetings. So if we do them virtually, they can be scheduled, within an hour back to back. For those 4 that have more than one, they get an hour and a half because they've got more than one funded project at their organization. So
I just hope we always keep in mind the purpose of the site visit, because it's a burden on the nonprofits to have a big group of people descend on them. And if we need to go, great. But if we're going just to make ourselves feel good about what we funded, I'm not interested.
So staff.
That's an interesting perspective, because it's also a burden to go to a bunch of different site visits all over town. As a working person, it's tough to schedule it in. So if it's not helpful to them and us, that's a really interesting point.
Well, didn't we limit it to 4 people? Not a big group per se, but maybe that's relative to the size of the project. But was it 3 or 4 that went to one site at one time?
This group, we didn't, it worked out where there was 3 or 4, but we had said that there could be up to 7, just to keep it so that it wasn't a majority to have to do the public meetings and notices and everything.
Yeah,
But we can limit it to whatever number we want. It seemed to generally, putting the schedule out there, it seemed to limit itself automatically with just a few.
Just not to answer anything, of course, but it's possible also that, site visits when funding is in the balance, like for a multi-year project, that's a lot of pressure. And sometimes you can go just to after project, when the project's done, to a site visit, see what's been accomplished, otherwise you're getting the information you need through the reports. I love going to site visits because it's fun to be there. It's fun to see the people. It's fun to see the kids. But I think we have to be careful about site visits just as a routine matter. Why are we going? And if we're really getting the information and we just want to see it, anyway, that's my thought.
We do coach the grantees and have some materials we'll share with them, that the goal is to deepen understanding and relationships and connection. So it's not a compliance visit, and we hope to have an informal feel to them so that they're not spending a lot of time preparing. That was feedback that we got from the committee in the past.
And they're always going to feel that it's compliant as long as money is still out.
There's a power imbalance in the funder and that funders. So we need direction as from the committee as to whether or not to offer a virtual and in person, or one way or the other.
The flip side of doing in person is that they don't have to come up with a presentation for us, which we, a burden. I get a real strong sense of quality when I actually walk into a place, and that's, non-judgmental, but I like to see it. I like to smell it. I like to feel it. But I think offering both might be a viable way to engage people.
I felt like the virtual visits were more of a formality than a useful exercise. there was still the time commitment going into it. Obviously, there had been preparation and it was helpful, but there was nothing presented that would not be available in the report. And I think I agree with Wendy that I get a much better feel walking into a place. And I think many of the places I visited they're very proud to share with us their programs and how they see their needs. I very much enjoy that. I think it's useful both ways, especially if folks are going to continue to seek funding from us. It's good to establish those relationships.
Well, I think this is no different when I was in banking. We were loaning the money and we made the site visits. And really, I found that customers never refused that, when we were giving them money or giving them grants. But not only that, when you make site visits, and you can see so much more, and you don't have to ask questions. You can walk around and just get the feel on how things are going. And sometimes you see what you don't want to see too, I will say. But I really think site visits, that's the way to go. And I don't think it will get much pushback, Philip, from the organizations, because if you were giving me money, I'd want you to come.
That's my point.
Yeah.
You're not going to get any pushback.
Yeah.
And the reason you're not going to get any pushback is because you have the money and they don't.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
I don't think that's a problem. They want the money.
Well, right.
I mean, come on.
I hear you.
I'll say though, that a lot of grantees and leaders of nonprofit organizations have said it's a problem. I mean, as a funder, that's one of the pieces of regular feedback we get, especially if it's not attached to like a large amount of money or to a process that requires that level of rigor. I mean, I think it's great for us to do site visits, but it's important that we're really concise about why we're there and what we're trying to get out of it.
I think if we can just be really focused and just continue to reiterate that what we're really working towards is a partnership of understanding how we support these grantees moving forward. And I think if we're attuned to the dynamics, Philip and Marcia, that you all are, you work in that philanthropic space, I think you're very astute to name those, that we're not trying to be extractive, we're not trying to be tourists, but this really is about how we, this is a sector I think that's often doesn't have as many champions in the community as it needs, and that this is a chance to keep building champions, not just in our role on the grants committee, but just more broadly. Just to answer the question, I would agree with Wendy and someone else. I think just that it felt like the virtual ones were more pro forma and more reiterations of the written reports than. So I wouldn't be overly inclined to continue those.
Is there a difference between having 5 guests and having 3 guests?
I think for impact in classrooms, if you're going through classrooms, yes.
There is.
Yeah.
I mean, so what if we reduce the number and say, have a target number of 3 people at each one in order to minimize the impact?
Sure would.
Who we're visiting, and make sure we cover them all, and that way that lessens the burden on everybody involved. Yeah, by the way, if I give you availability, that doesn't mean I'm going to all of them.
See, like our vice chair, look at you. Stepping into the role, I love it. Bringing some structure into this. Does this Rachel and Angeline give staff enough to kind of work with?
I'd like someone to summarize and tell me where this landed.
Site visits.
I don't know if there's
Three.
consensus or majority.
Right.
Yeah.
Does anyone object to not having virtual site visits? Maybe all in
I
person.
think we have agreement that we'll do all in person, smaller cohort sizes.
Yeah.
And we'll be very sensitive and attuned to the needs of the grantee and showing up. And then we can just work at our level to make sure we're communicating well as we report back. Is there good enough?
Yeah.
Good work? Great. Okay, awesome. Okay, we did have some time slotted, but I think we're gonna have to bump it. Unfortunately, Leslie had circulated some good resources around standards for early childhood workforce. Those are available via the committee email thread, so check those out and we'll keep Leslie trying to find time for a discussion about this. Are there any announcements? Anyone would like to share? We did not have anyone sign up for public comment. A reminder that we will not have a meeting in October. The reason for that is because we'll all be out doing our site visits. But we will come back together for our first meeting in November. And by that time, we will really be kind of staring down the pipeline of getting the applications ready to open up in December. So our work will pick up speed. With that, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn our meeting. Thank you all very much. And again, Carol and Marcia, we're so glad to have you all here. Yeah.